My name is Maggie Harper. I'm 31, and I live in a corner of Jackson, Mississippi where the streetlights flicker more often than they shine and nothing much happens after 10 p.m. except the hum of cicadas and the occasional bark from someone's forgotten hound. I work nights at a roadside diner called Morning Light. It's the kind of place that sits on the outskirts of town, tucked behind a gas station, mostly invisible to folks unless they're desperate for coffee at 2 a.m. or stranded by car trouble. I take the same route to work every night on a bicycle that should have been retired years ago. The chain slips if I pedal too fast and one of the brakes only works if you squeeze it like you're trying to wring water from a stone. Still, it gets me there and back. Some nights, I think the bike knows the way better than I do. I bundle up in a coat that's been restitched more times than I can count. The elbows are patched with denim, and one pocket is permanently sewn shut after a particularly stubborn rip last winter. It's nothing special, but it's mine, and it's warm enough to fight off the chill that seeps into the bones when you're riding alone at 3 a.m. The Morning Light Diner hasn't changed much since the 70s. The booths are cracked vinyl, the counter is chipped formica, and the only music comes from an old jukebox that jams every third song. The lights hum when it's too quiet, and the heater wheezes like it's sighing from the weight of serving a place that refuses to die. But there's comfort in its stubbornness, and its refusal to be anything but what it is. I know every stain on the counter and every flicker in the overhead bulbs. Routine doesn't scare me. Routine is safety. After each shift, I ride home in the silence of a town sleeping off its worries. My trailer sits alone on the far edge, past the last gas station, past where the pavement gives up and turns to gravel. The land out there is flat and open, and the wind sounds different, older somehow. I keep a lantern by the door because the power's gone out more than once. Sometimes I sit on the steps with a mug of instant coffee, watching the moon crawl over the trees. There's peace in that quiet. A kind of stillness that makes it easier to breathe. Inside the trailer, it's just me and a space too small for loneliness but too quiet to feel full. I keep things simple. A narrow bed with a sagging mattress. A table made from reclaimed wood. A kettle that takes forever to whistle. On the wall above the bed is a small corkboard where I've pinned old photos, some curling at the edges, some faded from too much sun. Most are of my brother. His smile and uniform. The two of us as kids, barefoot and grinning on a tire swing that's long since rotted away. I've only got one letter from him. Folded and refolded until the creases look like scars. He sent it from his last deployment overseas, back when he still thought he'd make it home. I read it sometimes when the nights feel heavier than usual. I try to hear his voice in the words, but time has a way of softening even the loudest echoes. I never talk about him. Not to coworkers. Not to neighbors. In fact, I don't talk much at all unless it's to take an order or offer someone a refill. There's not much left to say. After he died, there wasn't anyone else. Foster homes took us in and let us go. Families with names I can't remember. A few good ones, some bad. But after enough moves, enough bags packed in silence, you learn not to get attached. I stopped calling places home a long time ago. I don't own much. Most of what I have is second-hand or found. The quilt on my bed was rescued from a thrift store clearance bin. My dishes are mismatched, the kind of thing people donate when they've upgraded their lives. But there's a strange beauty in that, knowing that nothing here came easy. Everything has a story, even if I don't know it. Most nights at the diner are quiet. Truckers with tired eyes and regulars who drink their coffee like it's medicine. I refill their mugs, wipe down the same counter for the 100th time, and sometimes stare at the clock as if it might show me something different. There's a rhythm to it. A dull, steady hum that drowns out the noise of what-ifs and could-have-beens. And for the most part, that's enough. Quiet isn't loneliness if you choose it. I tell myself that, anyway. The only thing I truly miss is conversation, the kind that lingers and means something. The way my brother used to talk to me after lights out, telling stories to chase away the dark. Now, I keep company with silence. It doesn't argue. It doesn't leave. People at the diner know me, but not really. They know I'm dependable. I cover shifts. I show up early. I leave late. I don't complain. I get my tips, count them carefully, and sometimes walk 3 extra blocks to save 50 cents on bread. My life is small, and maybe that's the point. A smaller life means fewer pieces to break. So I drift through the days and nights, floating between a flickering diner and a crooked trailer, letting time pass like rain on glass, always there, always moving, but never quite touching me. Then one night, just before closing, a boy walked in. And everything began to change. He came in quietly, almost like a shadow slipping between doorframes. It was just past 11 p.m., near closing time, when the lights dimmed low and the only sound came from the low hum of the refrigerator and the scraping of plates being cleared away. I was rinsing out the last coffee pot when I felt a shift, the kind of stillness that comes when someone enters but doesn't want to be seen. He was thin, the kind of thin you don't grow out of without help. His coat hung on him like a hand-me-down made for someone else, sleeves swallowing his hands, the hem brushing the tops of his shoes. His shoes were scuffed and too tight, the leather cracked where the toes pushed against it. He moved slowly, like he'd already learned not to take up space, not to be noticed. He carried a school notebook under his arm, edges curled from wear, and his eyes moved like someone always counting exits. He sat in the farthest booth, the one where the jukebox's lights flickered just enough to make you feel watched, even when you weren't. He didn't look at me. Didn't speak. When I brought him a menu out of habit, he shook his head and whispered, barely audible, just water. I brought it to him, glass half full with ice that had started to melt by the time it reached his table. I placed a paper straw next to it, then went back to wiping the counter like nothing had shifted. But something had. The next night, same time, same booth. Same too large coat, same silent entry. He ordered only water again, and this time I didn't ask if he wanted anything else. He stared at the wall, then at the customers eating meals, his eyes never resting too long in one place. When they got their food, he watched, not rudely, not obviously, but with a hunger that didn't come from his stomach alone. It was a kind of watching that made my chest feel tight. I've seen that look before. In the mirror, years ago. The third night, I waited until my coworkers had disappeared into the back. I took a plate of scrambled eggs and toast to the kitchen window, told the cook it was a mistake order. No one questioned it. Mistakes happened. I brought it to the boys' table and set it down gently. Kitchen messed up, I said flatly, not looking at him. Can't throw it away. He didn't move at first. Just stared at the plate like it might vanish if he blinked. I walked away before he could protest, wiped down the napkin dispensers for the third time. When I glanced back 5 minutes later, the plate was empty. He never looked up. Never said a word. That became our rhythm. Every night, he came in. Every night, I found a reason to bring him something. A grilled cheese that was burned on one side, a bowl of soup that didn't get picked up. He never asked. I never explained. We built a quiet ritual from lies that weren't really lies, just truths wrapped in kindness. He always ate quickly, head bowed, fork scraping across porcelain like it was a race against time. And when he was done, he'd whisper thank you, so soft I could barely hear it. The others started to notice. Karen, the other night server, raised an eyebrow one night when I slid a plate of hash browns onto his table. "You running a charity now?" she muttered when we crossed paths near the coffee machine. I shrugged. Better than wasting it. The manager wasn't so subtle. "You feeding strays again," he said one evening, watching the boy from the corner of his eye. "You know that comes out of inventory." "I cover it," I replied, quietly. "From my tips." He rolled his eyes. "You do you. Just don't get the health department involved." After that, I started ringing up the meals myself, cash only. I'd take the plate order under employee meal, deduct it from the night's tips, and keep the receipt folded in my apron pocket. I stopped buying snacks for myself, stopped taking the longer route home that passed the bakery with day-old muffins. I figured I didn't need extra sugar when the world already felt this bitter. Even when the boy didn't show up, I still made the meal. wrapped it carefully, took it home. At first, I left it on the step outside my trailer. By morning, it was always gone. I never saw who took it. I didn't try. It didn't matter. Then one morning, the bag was still there. I stared at it for a while. Unopened. Untouched. I checked again that evening. Still there. The next morning, again. Something inside me curled tight, like a thread being pulled too hard. I threw the food out. Tried again the next night. Still untouched. 5 nights passed. Then 6. On the 7th, I didn't make the meal. I sat on the stoop instead, hands wrapped around a cold thermos, watching the empty horizon. That's when I heard it, the low rumble, not like the trucks that pass on the highway, but heavier. Deeper. I stood and moved to the edge of my trailer porch, squinting into the dark. 3 black SUVs turned down the gravel road like ghosts moving through fog. They stopped in front of my home. Doors opened in silence, and men in federal uniforms stepped out, their boots crunching on gravel like it was glass. One of them held an envelope. Sealed. Marked with government insignia. The air felt thick, like something sacred had entered the world. They said they needed to talk. And that was the moment my quiet life cracked open. I stood still on the porch, heart drumming in my chest like it was trying to remember a different rhythm. The envelope in the man's hand looked like it weighed more than it should have. Government markings. Sealed in the way official things are, stiff, formal, the kind of seal you don't break unless it's life-changing. Maggie Harper, one of the agents asked. I nodded. My voice didn't come. My hands were shaking and I didn't even try to hide it. We have a letter for you. And some information you need to hear. He handed me the envelope with both hands, like it was something sacred. Like it wasn't just paper, but memory. Inside was a typed letter and a photo. The photo came first. A boy. Thin. Eyes sharp with something deeper than sadness. And next to him, his father in uniform, one arm draped over the boy's shoulder. The father's name was in bold beneath the photo, Captain Daniel Keller, United States Air Force. The boy beside him? Zach. The same boy I'd fed night after night without ever knowing his name. The letter was dated nearly a year ago, marked to be delivered in the event of my death. I sat down on the steps, still in my house slippers, and read it under the dim porch light. In the letter, Captain Keller wrote about Zach. About how deployments had strained everything, the marriage, the household, the boy's ability to feel safe. He mentioned the mother in one line, almost like a shadow. She'd left shortly after Keller's last deployment. No note. No trace. Just vanished. Zach had been staying with a neighbor, but it didn't last. The neighbor's patience thinned, and one day, Zach ran. Disappeared from the system, from the streets. Keller had no way of knowing where his son was or who would care for him. So he did the only thing a father could do when facing the impossible, he wrote a final letter. One that asked, begged, really, that if anything happened to him, someone in the government would find whoever had helped his son. Whoever had fed him. Protected him. Given him dignity when the world had none to offer. My name was in that letter. Written in capital letters. Underlined. Repeated more than once. She left food for him. Night after night. No questions. Just kindness. Please, if I don't make it home, thank her for me. Tell her she saved my boy. That was the line I read 3 times before the tears came. Hot. Silent. They ran down my cheeks like they were in a hurry to leave my skin. I didn't care who saw. I didn't ask who was watching. The man who handed me the letter stood nearby, hat held respectfully at his chest. Zach's with his grandparents now, he said, his voice low and gentle. We were able to track them down in Tennessee. He's safe. In school. He asks about you. I shook my head. Not in disbelief. Just trying to absorb the weight of it. You fed him without ever asking why, the agent continued. That's rare. People usually want a story. A reason. Some kind of repayment. I didn't say anything. What could I say? That I saw hunger in him and remembered my own? That I understood what it meant to be invisible and didn't want him to feel that way, too? Instead, I just nodded. That night, after the SUVs disappeared down the road like a dream fading in morning light, I sat on my trailer's step holding the envelope. I read the letter again and again. The paper smelled faintly of ink and desert sand. Like somewhere along the way, the memory of Captain Keller had soaked into the page. The next morning, Jackson was different. I didn't expect it. I didn't want it, if I'm being honest. But the story had found its way to the local paper. Somehow, maybe through the Federal men, maybe through a tip, I was named. Woman feeds fallen soldier's son without asking why. The headline ran above the fold. My name in print. My picture, too. Me in that old coat, standing outside morning light, clutching a thermos. I didn't read the full article. I couldn't. The idea of people knowing that part of me, it felt like something sacred being turned into spectacle. But the town read it. They whispered. They pointed. They looked at me differently. At first, I stayed quiet. I kept working the night shift. I still rode that same bike. I still stopped by the bakery on Sundays to buy the cheapest loaf they had. But something began to shift. The first change was a small note on my trailer door. Folded into a napkin. Thank you for what you did. My husband served, too. You reminded me what kindness looks like. The second change was a man, a veteran, judging by the way he stood, who came into the diner just after midnight and handed me a box of canned goods. For your pantry, he said. Or for whoever else might be hungry. Word spread. Slowly at first. Then faster. By the end of the week, 3 more veterans stopped by the diner. One brought a photo of his son, lost in Iraq. Another handed me a $20 bill and said, for the next Zach you find. My manager, the one who once scolded me for feeding strays, pulled me aside after the dinner rush. He didn't apologize exactly, but his voice was different. Softer. We're starting a pay-what-you-can shelf, he said, tapping a new display by the front register. If someone needs a meal, we won't turn them away. You were right. People need dignity. There was a plaque on the wall by the end of the week. Just a small one. Brass. Mounted above the booth where Zach used to sit. It read, in honor of the unseen acts of kindness. For Zach. For all the children who go unnoticed. People stopped me in the grocery store. On the sidewalk. At the laundromat. Not for autographs or attention, just to say something kind. Just to tell me I reminded them that compassion still had a place. I never asked for any of it. But I accepted it. Because if a boy could find safety in a silent act of generosity, maybe the world could find its way back to something good again. I kept the coin on my windowsill, right where the light could catch it every morning. It wasn't there the night before. No knock. No note. Just a quiet gift placed with more care than ceremony. It glinted in the sun like it had its own kind of memory. One side bore the insignia of special operations, sleek, sharp, unmistakable. The other side was etched with the word Semper Memor, always remembering. It was a challenge coin. Military issued. Rare. Not something you handed out for casual thanks. These were given for moments. For service, for courage, for acts done when nobody else was watching. I turned it over in my hand slowly, feeling the grooves of the metal, the weight of it settling into my palm like it belonged there. Someone had been watching after all. Someone who had seen, who had known. I didn't ask who left it. I never would. That wasn't the point. The coin wasn't a reward. It was a reminder. A symbol of something larger than just me or Zach or even Captain Keller. It was the echo of a quiet decision made in the still of night, repeated again and again without fanfare. That night, I prepared a meal again. A peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of soup. I packed it the way I always had. Folded the napkin. Tied the paper bag with a twist of twine. I placed it by the door, not because I thought someone would take it, but because I needed to believe someone still might. That there was still someone out there hungry and unseen. That maybe, in some quiet place, another Zach was waiting. I sat beside the bag for a long time, wrapped in my worn coat, watching the stars trace their way across the black Mississippi sky. The cicadas were quieter now, the air cooler. Autumn had arrived unnoticed, brushing the edges of everything with silver breath. I thought about Zach often. I pictured him with his grandparents, sitting at a real table with real meals. I imagined him smiling again, shoulders uncurled, eyes not scanning every room for exits. I hoped someone was asking him about school, about his favorite books, about how he slept at night. I hoped he remembered that someone once fed him without asking for anything in return. And that he carried that memory like armor. The town continued to change. Slowly, but it did. More diners started keeping pay-it-forward tabs. Local veterans gathered once a week now in the diner, using the back booth as their unofficial headquarters. They told stories, shared meals, laughed in the way only those who've seen darkness can laugh, with gratitude. People left extra tips, slipped gift cards under plates, donated jackets and boots in quiet exchanges that needed no cameras. One day, a woman I'd never met stopped me outside the diner. "My son knew Zach," she said, voice trembling. "They were in the same grade. He told me what you did. I just wanted to say, he's a better boy for it. He understands kindness now." I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. At the diner, the plaque stayed polished. Customers started sitting in that booth on purpose. Some left folded notes on the table, messages to strangers, encouragement scrawled in careful print. I read a few on my breaks. Most started the same, "To whoever needs this." I never stopped working nights. The rhythm still suited me. I still rode the same bike. The same coat. But the weight of my solitude had changed. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to everyone. A few weeks after the article ran, a high school student came by the diner with a backpack and a notepad. She said she was writing a report on local heroes. She asked to interview me. "I'm not a hero," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. She looked at me for a moment and smiled. "That's what they all say." I agreed, eventually. She asked questions about Zach, about the meals, about why I did it. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe because someone once helped me. Or maybe I just didn't want him to feel like the world had forgotten him." She nodded. "So you did it without expecting anything?" I shrugged. Kindness with expectations isn't kindness. It's a trade. She wrote that down. Word for word. The story made it into the local school paper. Then the regional news. Then, months later, into a national article about small acts with big impacts. People sent letters to the diner, some addressed simply to the woman who fed the boy. Some had stories of their own. Memories of meals shared in bus stations. Strangers who had paid for groceries. Teachers who kept granola bars in drawers just in case. I kept those letters in a box beneath my bed, beside my brother's letter. They belonged together. Pieces of a world still capable of grace. One night, just before closing, a new customer walked in. A young man. Military haircut. Clean boots. He asked for a table for one. As I poured his coffee, he looked up at me and said quietly, "My uncle told me about you. He said you saved a boy without asking who he was." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. He left a $10 tip on a $5 bill. Tucked underneath was a folded note, "For the next one." It didn't end with Zach. That's the part that stayed with me. Every meal since felt like part of something larger. A circle that kept growing, invisible but unbreakable. I was just a link. A woman in a small town who once saw a hungry boy and didn't look away. I never saw Zach again. But I didn't need to. He was safe. He was remembered. And I knew quiet, invisible Maggie Harper had done one thing that mattered. In a world quick to turn its back, I had chosen to face toward the need. I had chosen to feed the forgotten. And sometimes, that was enough to save a life. Kindness without questions is enough.